Welcome back to the world of survivor horror. This is the Spencer Statement, a podcast where my friends and I do some deep dives into the Resident Evil series. I'm Vanessa, aka Vanessa Sketch, and with me as always are my friends Chris, aka Jabberwocky 1986. Hey.
Hey yo.
And Paul, aka Castlewood Blogs. Hey.
Hey there, how's it going?
Good. Now that we're back after a hiatus because I had a lot of work and then had to move, and it was a whole thing, and we're all settled in now, we're going to do a deep dive into Resident Evil 1. We're going to be covering both the original and the remake, and we have a lot of news to cover today, so this is going to end up being a two-parter episode. First one's going to be focusing more on the original, and the remake will get more focus in part 2, but, since it's us, there's, probably going to be some comparison talk along the way.
And we will probably be covering the characters in part 2.
Yes.
Just to get that clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely stay tuned for both of those, and it's going to be a real fun episode, but first we have a ton of news to cover since the last time, so we're going to start off with that.
Yeah.
News, first item of business, Resistance. Resident Evil Resistance had its final planned update this month in October 2020. Apparently, it kind of broke it balance-wise, though.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer.
Surprise, surprise.
I've been seeing some of the clips that have been coming out about that, and yeah, it's pretty rough. It looks really, really rough. And I'm also hearing that it's also, I don't know if it's like somehow changed the player base because of it, but I'm also just, it's amazing following people on Twitter and seeing their clips that they post of gameplay and just like all the rage quits and the BS, and definitely the balancing. Go ahead.
All I'm seeing is the masterminds rage quitting.
Right.
That's all I'm seeing.
I mean, I've seen it on like both ends where it's like survivors are like, no, it's utterly broken. The masterminds are just steamrolling everyone. And then masterminds going, no, the survivors are steamrolling me. So I guess everyone is unhappy.
Get rid of the steamroller and bring back in the jackhammers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and while you're at it, you might as well get some nice pickaxes, and I don't know, maybe get like a power drill.
I mean, I hope that they are able to go back to it at some point to rebalance things. I mean, I'm also sad that we won't get more masterminds because, like, the series itself had a lot of good characters for that. So, well, maybe someday.
When you have a series based on evil maniacal maniacs unleashing biological horrors on the world, you probably do have a good stock for masterminds.
It's tailor-made. I wanted Alfred, okay? I wanted Alfred.
I was just holding out for Vincent Goldman.
Vincent, this is your mother. Please stop being evil. Please.
No, Vanessa, do you mean Alfred or Alexia?
I mean Alfred because of how he handled things in the game over his loudspeaker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In all fairness, though, he did try to shoot you.
He's not good at shooting.
No.
But it's still a lot more than other maniacs did.
Fair enough. He gets points for that.
It's you got to give him the little "you tried" sticker.
Bing. There he goes. Okay, so next thing is Infinite Darkness, a CGI Netflix series starring Leon and Claire, is set to release in 2021. We don't really know that much about it at this point, other than it's about them. And
it's also a Netflix series and probably cancelled after 2 seasons.
Yep.
I mean, I expected it just to be like a 1-season, like mini-series sort of thing.
If we get 2 series, I'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at first I thought it was just a movie anyway, so this is just more Leon and Claire.
Leon and his growing alcoholism.
What I'm kind of curious to see with where it goes with Infinite Darkness, at least, is because as far as we know, the main format is with these 2 characters. But it's unfortunate to see yet another aspect, another medium, another adaptation where this really seems you could do a great anthology show where like every episode is a new scenario, kind of the way they did with some of the comics, and I'd be super into that. But it's and part of that I think is just because my concern always with ongoing stories is characters when they develop long enough, then the writer's own quirks start to show up. But I don't know, maybe Stephen Moffat's has burned me over the years.
Oh, you've suffered from the Moffat Wars.
I have, but
They're there.
and but yeah, I guess what I
They're
mean with
there.
anthologies, that means that the story gets to be self-contained, and so then when that short story is done, you don't have to worry about like, oh, I love this character, and then 5 episodes later, it's like, oh God, what did they do to them?
Yeah, but I think the problem with that is that an anthology show, you need to have different writers, different voice actors. So it's a constantly changing casting. And
Good point.
they don't want to spend the money on that.
Yeah.
Besides, Leon and Claire have been around for so long, they've already had their own detours into Derailment Island, so...
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So let's. No, never mind. Never mind. I was gonna say, have they both each gotten their own island yet? And I got confused with Resident Evil Gaiden. It's like, no, that was a boat.
Well, I mean, Leon went to that terrible RE4 island at the end.
Oh, that's okay. That's true. Yeah. God, that was pathetic, wasn't it?
It was not great. But also, there's going to be a manga by Tokyo Pop, I believe, that is, I guess, I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be an adaptation of the Netflix series or a companion piece to it, but that is also due to be released in 2021 alongside the series.
I'd actually be more interested in that.
Yeah, the mangas have been actually pretty interesting, and I would like to talk about them in more depth at some point, but...
We will probably do an episode where we discuss Resident Evil in literature. So the S.D. Perry novels and the mangas.
Oh, God.
Wildstorm Comics.
Yeah, Wildstorm Comics. I was thinking of those. But God, if we have to do the novels, we're actually gonna have to rebuy Caliban Cove and the Umbrella Conspiracy.
Haha.
Look, I just want to do Jill undercover as a college student, hunting down a
Oh
werewolf.
my god, yes.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, it'll work out now with RE Village 8. But we'll talk about that more in a minute.
But I don't think Ethan will be done in a Jill wig and a skirt.
No, he's cosplaying as Ark Thompson, so
Oh, that's right.
he's
yes.
already got his own outfit.
Right.
So, yeah, speaking of 8, there's been some news recently.
Yeah, but also in other actual like TV series stuff, yeah, there's also a live action TV series about the Wesker children.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we had discussed this before because rumors had been coming out about this in the spring, and
Yeah, we briefly talked about the rumors, and I guess they mostly turned out to be accurate about Jade and Billy Wesker. His daughter's moving to New Raccoon City, and it's going to be a split timeline. First about them as children, like teenagers, and then later on in like a post-apocalyptic blah.
I'm just going to say, you can't see me now, folks, but I'm shuddering like crazy. Ugh. No, thank you.
yeah.
Paul is curled up, and he's just going to roll away from it. Roll away from the series.
And then suddenly this little prince from the cosmos just comes and rolls him up onto a bunch of different stuff.
Well,
He's in the stars now.
you both know my opinion on adaptations of Resident Evil.
Yes.
They don't
Yeah,
exist.
It's not ideal.
Well, I don't know. If you
not ideal.
tune into a particular episode of Mystery Death Theater 5000, we may actually have a contrarian moment to that. But
And Chris, if you want to air that episode, I will take it to mean you don't want to live anymore.
The Spencer statement, where you come for threats and you stay for the Resident Evil.
yes.
I don't
sweet,
make
sweet
threats.
threats.
I make promises.
Oh, promises. The one thing I was going to say regarding the TV show, though, was, again, though, like Infinite Darkness, it's a case of whether it's good or bad, whether we like it or not, figure probably just 2 seasons and we'll be fine. And especially what I'm hearing is that since the restrictions with filming under the COVID-19 situation and the different parameters and things like that, budgeting has become a much bigger concern for some of these shows because now they're having to add, thousands of dollars onto getting the PPE, being supplied on set, doing regular testing. I know some folks that worked on, I think it was the second season of The Birch, and they were doing testing 3 times a week. And that's basically becoming
Not only
the norm.
that, but they actually have to pay for accommodation if somebody turns out to actually have COVID or they've been exposed to it. So you have to shut down the entire set.
Yes,
and isolate people for 2 to 3 weeks. So that is a massive cost that's being added on to film at the moment.
precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the Resident Evil reboot movie has been cast and is supposedly going to cover the first two games.
There's a reboot movie? There was a movie in the first place?
Your opinions on the non-existence of the first film series? Well documented. But yeah, I think the casting is good, but adapting the first two games into one film is too many plot points that you can really realistically fit into a 2-hour film.
Yeah, you're spreading too much of a complicated story because you've got to fit in Stars, you've got to fit in Umbrella, the betrayal of Wesker, what actually happens to the Stars members, both Alpha and Bravo team.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to cover the aftermath of that with the cover-up by Irons and the RPD.
Yep.
And then you've got to do the assault on Birkin,
Right.
the infection of Raccoon City, and then Leon and Claire's disastrous day in Raccoon City. So that's too much to fit into one film, and I kind of feel
Yeah.
it would be much better if they use the first film to set up the second.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah, and I know Vanessa and I have talked about wanting to adapt Resident Evil, for years. Like, we even had an agreement as friends back in, good God, like, I don't want to mention how many years ago, but that I would write the first and she would write the second. And
It's well known that we've been friends for like a long ass time, and it's about Resident Evil. So like, let's just be real. It's been like 20 years.
yeah,
A long
At
time
the
ago
least.
in a forum far, far away.
right, exactly. But the point, though, is that I was going to make, though, about regarding, because completely agreed. I think that if you start with the first film and you make that its own sole experience, because the games even kind of do this. The first game, scenarios is the house, it's the forest, it's the kind of nature run amok monsters like the snake and the sharks and the plant. And then you have...
And the spider.
And the spider, yeah, exactly. And then you get to the sequel, which is urban, and it's more mutations and kind of more about the flesh and the G virus. And, there's specific aesthetics for those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a design point of view, it's like it makes sense because you have these distinctive but connected stories. What I have a suspicion they're going to end up doing with this adaptation, if they're going to try to combine 1 and 2, it's going to probably get turned into a very generic action monster movie. Birkin and Wesker are going to both be kind of villainous characters. I suspect
I mean, they are.
And,
Or they'll get rolled into one.
what I mean is like mastermind and henchman. And then they're going to use the twist about Wesker being the betrayer to turn him into the mastermind and probably have him kill Birkin within the storyline. And I know everyone's probably thinking, oh, but this is totally different. It's like, exactly. That's what they're going to do. The cover-up's going to be going on. They may try to build like the mansion stuff as like a flashback sequence, but mostly make it about 2, because 2 has been consistently the most popular in the franchise. And
Yeah, I can also
has.
see Claire being a college student in Raccoon City, and Chris, if he has a big role in the film, will probably be about getting to Claire as she's trapped in the university or something, and Leon is probably going to be downgraded from a rookie cop to maybe campus security.
I think he's still considered. I think he's still listed as RPD.
he's listed as RPD. There's some rumors about the log line for the casting for his character, which has got people concerned. I'm not going to mention that here just because it is, at this point, unconfirmed. It has to do with like his backstory as a cop, and if that is the case, that was what clued me into, okay, there's going to be maybe tonal faithfulness, but this is going to be quite the evolution. The two concerns from behind the camera that I have is that the writer that's currently listed is a Greg Russo, and the only things that he's been attached to are the most recent Mortal Kombat film that is supposedly in post-production now. That's the one that's got Cho Taslim as Sub-Zero. Yeah, the one by Simon McQuad. And then he has this, and apparently he was attached to the Death Note 2 live action for Netflix at one point. So this guy has got like nothing to his name. And, and that's,
Oh, two projects I had no idea actually existed.
I mean, the new Mortal Kombat sounds good. The casting was pretty all right.
I hadn't even heard that there was another one.
Yeah, there's another
I
one
heard
coming.
rumors that there was going to be another one, but not necessarily that it had been finished.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
Yeah.
but,
well, they're really taking away off Paul Anderson's work now.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
So in terms of the director, it's a case of that it's a skilled director, or at the very least he has experience of like having done 47 Meters Down and 1 and 2, and he also did The Strangers Pray at Night, which is kind of his more recent credits. The one that I actually have seen of his was Storage 24, the Noel Clarke monster movie from I think it's about 8 years ago. And
Probably more than that, I think.
no, it's 2012. I just looked it up.
Oh, wow.
Fuck you, time.
I mean, it feels like a 2008 movie though, doesn't it? It feels like it's older than that.
To be fair, this year's felt like it's gone on for 5.
That is also true.
It's felt both long and incredibly short at the same time, so I have no idea what time is anymore.
This is true. Anyway, just to finish my point about Johannes Roberts is, I think he has potential, and this could be something that, depending on the scope of the budget he's able to have and what he's able to wrangle, like as a director, he can show himself off like as like, okay, this is really good management of this production. But at the same time, what concerns me is that there is also the possibility, kind of like Paul Anderson, that you end up with a situation where it's about getting it done. It's not about making a great movie. It's about content. You have to create content. Like, fuck that shit. I wanted to make movies when I was 7 years old, not create content. Get the fuck out of here with that.
You don't have to worry about content. I mean, there's a story. That's it. You're good. You're good. You don't have to worry about any of that.
Just not with Anderson.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, like, I mean, recently I was seeing the Twitter threads about Anderson and the final chapter in the lawsuit against him for, really some reckless endangerment of that stunt actress. And I mean, seriously, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy.
I mean, for all I joke about the Resident Evil films not existent, it's always felt like when he's made those films, it's just basically him and Mila Jovovich going, I want to add a new room to the mansion. Well, let's do another Resident Evil film. That's what it's always felt like to me.
Yeah, there was also some insultingly, like, there really wasn't a story there, so we added a story, and I'm like, fuck you, there wasn't a story there. I mean, look at what we got now with the reboot. We got so much story, we can't even fit it.
Exactly.
And the thing as well, like, you really can't call what Anderson had was a story, because he's just basically married his lead actress and made her... He's basically married his OC.
That's right. Yeah. I saw that recently.
A bunch of like loosely connected events that keep getting both retconned back in and then retconned out and then back in again. And they, like, it's the same guy, but he can't keep any of it straight. And you know what? Fuck it. It's can't go on about this.
It's inconsistent, but ironically enough, inconsistency is a hallmark of Resident Evil.
Yes.
Yeah, but not like this.
Not like this.
Not like this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Resident Evil 8, aka Resident Evil Village now, because there's been at least 2 trailers since the last time we talked, and some news about that.
But I think, Vanessa, you and I also want to confirm the fact that we're not going to call it Village. It's
calling it or 8.
Yeah.
It's right there in the title. You can see the Roman numerals for 5111. It's Resident Evil 8.
Yep. Mm-hmm. If you didn't want me to call it 8, you wouldn't have put the Roman numeral in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm definitely in the same boat.
Sorry.
Big brain talk.
But, like, also, hey, kinda werewolves now? Kinda.
I'm still going with the idea that these are people with hypertrichosis. So, if you've ever seen, like, carnivals where they had, like, the bearded lady or the wolfman.
Yeah.
It's people who have excessive body hair. And I'm just kind of thinking, like, they've treated these people with a genetic condition like animals. They've been infected with whatever, they've become animals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking a combination of Ethan and Mia's baby's fetus power and Plaga's. because their faces make me think of El Gigante.
Also, yeah, okay, that's a good point.
Like
Interesting.
the facial structure is very similar to me. Like he had every iteration of that particular monster has a very distinct face, and like the stuff we've seen of like the roaring, hairy guy just
Yeah.
really reminds me of it.
El Gigante had a very overly pronounced face.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, them bone structure.
But
What's his secret?
Maybe he's
Is
born
he a
with it.
model?
maybe he grinds the bones to make his bread.
Probably does. He's coming out from the mines of Moria. I mean, he might as well because it's in not Spain or whatever. And now we're in not Europe again. We're in not Eastern Europe, but Eastern Europe.
Yeah, we're in not Transylvania, but it's basically Transylvania because they've taken a castle from Romania and brought it into the game.
And they're like, but it's not that though. And I'm like, okay, but here's my counterpoint. Why isn't anybody wearing any clothes from the last fucking century? Why do you keep going back to this well? Resident Evil is still a world that takes place in modern times. It's still, like, look at these characters. Why aren't they decked out like in denim at the very least, like looking like they came from the 80s? If you wanted to be like, oh, they're not up to date.
It's Eastern Europe. Let them all wear tracksuits.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, get us a tracksuit.
Just something.
Yeah,
Just throw me a bone and stop making them all look like extras from fucking Frankenstein. It's driving me nuts.
That's just it. That's my line of thinking is that have they been researching this by looking at old Universal horror films?
But that's usually the case. I mean, I discussed this a bit on, when we've discussed Village in the past, and that there's this sort of obsession when Capcom does these projects, and it's like they'll take like a certain visual aesthetic inspiration and just go so whole hog into that like logic gets completely thrown out the window.
But by the same token, if they have an American city, it will look like an American city. If they have a Japanese city, it will look like a Japanese city. If there's a Chinese city, it looks like a Chinese city. So why is it then, whenever they visit Europe, it looks like it's from fucking Transylvania?
It is really baffling, and it's like, well, we wanted to go back to like the RA4 aesthetic, and I'm like, did you have to though?
There's a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm really excited because, like, I know a lot of people did have some issues with Ethan, but, like, I still liked him as a character, so I had no problem seeing him again. I was, fine with generally the setup of it, but it's the, like, committed to the RE4 aesthetic, but, like, RE4, but now it's in first person and even more intense that, like, just kind of turns me off to it.
And Europe has had electricity in houses
Yeah.
for over 100 years.
It's so puzzling. It's like, why do you guys think this is what Europe is like?
I mean, I can tell you this right now. I live on the western edge of Europe. We've got electricity.
Oh, I thought you
do?
were using fairy magic to get into this podcast.
A summoning circle.
Yeah.
No,
Okay,
I've got a giant hamster wheel with your name on it, Chris.
I was waiting for that. Some sort of response to that.
Well, it also runs on movie references.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Yeah. No, that's a good
And it
power.
just-
I
Self-sustaining.
yeah, no, the movie reference thing, that's how I power the projector in the media room. That's why I have to
We're
keep
going to be
putting
talking
Blu-rays
about
in there.
projectors anyway in Resident Evil, I think.
Yeah. The
I mean, we did get confirmation that Chris is the one who brings Ethan to the village now. Like,
Right.
that is the last update, which is like, okay, I mean, that's fine.
Yep.
I mean, like, I've killed your
fine.
wife. I'm going to take you to a village in Eastern Europe, which seems to be stuck in the 1900s, but we're going to have fun.
Sure, Redfield, this is the worst field trip you've ever taken me on.
It's the only field trip he's taken on.
I hate your turtleneck. You know who wore it better? Wesker.
oh, I like the turtle.
Yeah.
I like the turtle.
Yeah, that's. I'm saying that is the kind of stuff that Ethan could throw at him to make him feel bad.
That's true. Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
again, like, Ethan trying to talk sass to Chris Redfield, in his Chunk Melonfield form.
It's pretty hilarious.
It's like it's like imagining DJ Qualls trying to tough talk, I don't know, Dave Bautista.
No, it kind of feels like Wile E. Coyote realizing he's fucked up and the ball's about to hit him and he just takes out a tiny little umbrella.
That's okay.
And a tiny little sign that says, "Yikes."
Right, there we go. Oh,
tiny little red and white umbrella.
Goodness gracious, my God. Hey, so I mean, wait.
Also,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
What? Sorry.
Please go ahead. I'm
okay,
making stupid jokes. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Well, just there was some stuff about there's going to be obviously a store kind of setup and a new kind of merchant, but it's still unclear whether it is that old lady or somebody else that haven't shown off yet. Also, how about when they trolled literally everyone with like the guy playing several minutes of RE8 and then just only focused on him and none of the game. It was like, wow, that's a real dick move.
Yeah,
actually.
that was pretty
That's a
cool.
marketing strategy that's gonna backfire on them.
Yeah, and
I think it already did. People were fucking pissed.
Oh, they were pissed. Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't get up early for that one. I got up early for the previous one, and it's funny that it felt like such a clusterfuck, because of just there was nothing. It literally was show the same trailer they had revealed a week before, do a sort of discussion video that shows like maybe a second and a half of new in-game footage. And then
it's mostly the tunnel thing, right? Like him crawling through the tunnel.
It was actually it was an alternate angle of the of him coming into the main hall of the manor or the castle room area, which it suddenly just hit me. That looks like the castle interior, the manor interior in Underworld, in the first Underworld. I suddenly just realized that. It's like, why does it look familiar? Anyway.
I can imagine they're going to be a vampire werewolf aesthetic with that being referenced.
Oh, certainly.
There, confirmed.
Yeah, exactly. Right, but the it was even it was so rough of a showcase at TGS that I think it was IGN's translator that I was listening to. They had not been given any sort of a script to go off of. And so they were having
they have to freeball it. Oh, Jesus.
And they're dropping things. They're apologizing. They're like, there's some stuff they're not able to translate just because like it's going too fast. So it was TGS overall this year was definitely, pretty rough shot. But that was because
it's a shame because Capcom is usually very good with its presentations.
Oh yeah. And
they're usually better than this.
Exactly. Which is, and it's,
I mean, COVID 2020 is like a nightmare hellscape. So you want to cut them some slack, but still it feels like some unforced errors that even with the situation being what it is, you could still avoid this.
Yeah.
You could still avoid this pretty easily.
Right.
And there is some controversy though, because it kind of seems now because of COVID, they might not necessarily make the projected January release date. It could be pushed back to April, I think, from what I've heard.
Oh, and I've heard that's...
Was it?
Actually, what I had heard was that January was like what they were hoping for like 6-7 months ago. It got pushed. It was looking like April is kind of the ballpark. And now, because the idea is they're trying to get it for the fiscal year. And the looks of things is, no, it's going to next fiscal year. And I'm wondering if that's why they're putting more of like the marketing resources behind Monster Hunter, because the showcase at TGS for Monster Hunter was fantastic, and actually looks really good. And I'm wondering if it's that they know that's going to be their moneymaker to keep the company, doing well through this fiscal year. Because, I mean, this is...
any online game that requires updates or has any new packs, be it DLC or anything like that, will be a good money maker. So when you have a full new release, that's the risk.
Yeah, all I'd ever heard was 2021, so I had no idea of like any more solid release date than that.
Well, we've got 365 choices then.
It sure does narrow it down.
But there's also the second trailer as well, which is I think is being nicknamed the Fairy Tale trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Which, what are your thoughts on that?
I like that they tried to expand into a different style that is far different than anything Resident Evil has done before. So that aspect I'm fine with. Again, it's still mostly just the committed to RE4 weird aesthetic that bothers me, and
Yeah.
at least the fairy tale aspect of it doesn't really pull that in.
There are a number of rumors as well that the fairy tale reflects the journey that Ethan's going to have to go on
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
the beaten
I
trail.
like it. I like it as a framing device.
Yeah.
Right. We get those sort of clues about things, which is the interesting thing also, as because I know we have our wild speculative theories about, how much of this is really happening and things like that. And so far we're kind of taking this at face value, but, it's, it'll be interesting to see, especially with how much the storybook, is very fleshed out, visually. And as we've said, that Capcom has this tendency, like when they go into like, this is the fantasy, this is the world of the game that we're creating, regardless of logic, regardless of realism. I'm just kind of curious to see kind of where that goes and how that ends up just playing out, especially with regard to, the elements of like the idea of even like the fetus, because often a lot of fairy tales have children as a core element. Does that mean it's a sacrificial child, or that they're waiting for like a second coming? What is it that's, being sought here? So, there is a lot of interesting aspects. I like the trailer. It wasn't as strong as the announcement trailer to me, but the new visuals, like the environments you get to see, look fantastic. I'm glad that it looks like they did a better job kind of pre-rendering this so it had more frames, because I noticed the announcement trailer had a lot of frame drops, or at the very least like scenes that should have been running at like 30 looked like they were running at 12 or 15 FPS. So
Yeah. The only thing I will say about the fairy tale, though, is that the one constant about fairy tales is that they are meant to impart a lesson to children. And oftentimes, like, if the dragon gets killed, you're not telling the kid that dragons exist. You're telling them if they do exist, they can be killed. You're telling them that there are scary things in the world. They can be stopped. But there's also the cautionary fairy tale, which is what this one feels like. It's the little girl runs away from her mother and gets lost in the forest. So you're telling someone, when you run away from the family or whatever authority, you're putting yourself at risk, which is what I think Ethan will be doing.
Right.
I still think that Chris is not going to be the main villain, because I cannot see Capcom taking one of their biggest characters and one of the most successful franchises they've got and completely turn them into a villain.
Oh no.
yeah,
I
they're
can
gonna
see the-
yeah, it has to happen now.
Yeah. It's going to be Ethan strays away from Chris and ends up in trouble. Which is my thought on what the fairy tale is.
I'm also still not 100% convinced that Mia is true facts, never coming back dead.
Just gonna rickroll him at the end.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, I understand that you guys said that you cured her and everything, but in RE7 alone, I shot her 20 times and hit her with an axe.
In the
and,
neck.
Yeah, in the neck. And she still came back from all of that. So, nah.
Yeah, it's just gonna be... It's not gonna be what it appears to be anyway.
Yeah. Like, I can understand Ethan might think that she's dead because, like, I don't know, her resurrection is taking too long. I don't have as active a virus now, so it's like delayed reaction resurrection, but I don't see her for real being still dead yet.
I just hope
I need more evidence.
I need to see her dead on a slab with a wide incision in her chest.
I need them to get to the end of the game and she's still dead for me to believe that she's dead.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
it's understandable.
While Capcom never does a joke ending for Resident Evil, I'm kind of hoping there is one with this, and it's just like, it just turns out that Ethan's been sleeping during like a Universal Monsters marathon.
Oh no.
And
Yeah, I
Mia's
can
just
see
kind of
that.
like shaking him awake, going like, "Wake up!
I would take
wake
that.
up! Chris is here."
Oh gosh. Yeah. The
And the nightmare begins again.
right. Yeah. Or yeah, it's
For
like
real.
it's like Nightmare City, right? You know, and then
Yeah.
and so
Do, 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 do.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no,
Yeah,
no.
there you go. You know, it's funny you mentioned the old monster movie references because I was looking through the trailer again, and that's what we've mentioned. The merchant character seems to be this character that has a very Charles Lawton sort of body type. It looks like, which I think is an interesting nod because Charles Lawton famously played Quasimodo in the old Hunchback of Notre Dame, and regarding the fairy tale aspect, he also was the director of Night of the Hunter in the 1950s, which is considered a classic now, but was a famous flop in its day, but is also considered sort of a sort of a more contemporary fairy tale about children getting lost and, you know, being chased and pursued by this figure of a sort of cult-like nature. So it's like, okay, I'm picking up what they're putting down a little bit.
I'm also kind of guessing as well that there's an old woman in the game. She's being listed as an ally for Ethan at some stage. I'm kind of wondering, though, is she going to be like Bela Lugosi's mother in The Wolfman?
I was wondering that too. Yeah.
Interesting theory.
If she's an ally, the other thing also I'm wondering is, are they going to do an upgrade tree and that she gives you like secret stuff that like boost you up? I don't know. Speculation.
I don't want upgrade trees.
Neither do I.
I like the classic survival horror aspect where the upgrades come from progression and finding new stuff.
Yeah, you want your upgrade to be your new gun makes a louder boom.
Yeah. it bigger boom now. Take out monsters.
Yes.
Like I've already accepted that, yeah, there's going to be a store, so there's a certain amount of upgrades that probably are going to be purchased, but I would still like to be able to find stuff. I think that kind of pacing is the best version
I
of
would just
Resident
like
Evil games.
I would actually just like it if the store was just basically like, okay, so I've got handgun bullets, I've got some herbs, I've also got some body armor. Oh, can you upgrade my gun? I'm sorry, is this a gun shop? Do I have a workbench behind me? I sell you items. I don't upgrade shit.
I sell you, you do your own work, buddy.
It's like, can you adjust the spring on the recoil on this handgun? It's like, no.
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 I cannot magically make this gun do more damage when the damage is coming from the bullets.
That's video game bullets for you.
That's video game bullets for you. Yeah. Oh god, playing Evil Wolfen's been that way. But anyway, yeah.
I think that's all the news we have, unless there's anything we've missed.
Yeah. No, I think that's about it. So let's move on to the main topic, which is Resident Evil. All right, so now we're going to move on to our main topic, Resident Evil 1. Most of it is going to be about the original this time, and we'll move on to the remake next time. So,
Yes.
Chris, please tell us some of the development history, because I know you took copious amounts of notes about it.
Copious, yes. Well, indeed. So I know that some
There's
of
reams of paper here.
it's fine. It's fine. Just shuffle it to the side. We'll recycle it later.
Avalanche!
When covering Resident Evil 1, I know that there's a lot of wonderful people that have covered the backstory of the making of. It's been, talked about through videos about Sweet Home, and Sphere Hunter Susie has done an amazing video about it. So I'm just going to kind of give sort of the overview. In the early 1990s, Tokoru Fujiwara, who was the producer of like Sweet Home, Ghouls and Ghosts, and a plethora of 1990s heyday Capcom games for the consoles, he saw an opportunity to work on a new horror game when the PlayStation was coming around, and realized that the ideas visually he had wanted to do with Sweet Home could be possibly accomplished there. Now, Sweet Home, as a lot of people say, oh, that's the precursor to Resident Evil. The interesting thing is, Capcom is one of the only companies to have done great license games during the Nintendo and Super Nintendo era. And Sweet Home is actually a licensed game. It's based on a Kiyoshi Kurosawa movie from 1989. I believe it was released the same year on the NES. And it was actually, some people say like, oh, they were intending to do a new Sweet Home game, and actually the rights of the license, I think, had lapsed by that point, so they needed to come up with something different. So Fujiwara had been working with Shinji Mikami and had essentially mentored him, to some extent at the company. And Mikami at this point had worked on like the Disney's Aladdin game. He worked on the Goof Troop game for this as Super Nintendo, and kind of coincidentally, Mikami today kind of holds sort of a similar position where like Ikumi Nakamura, Suda 51, etc. have been sort of mentored by him, since then. And Fujiwara goes to Mikami and says, I want to make a new like entertainment game. I want to make a new something. It's kind of something similar to Sweet Home. And, basically let's figure this out. And the kind of the overview that I've been able to ascertain is that for around 6 months, Mikami's designing the documents of like how to put this thing together, basically solo. And, I don't know to what extent the team, started to come together, but, this is somewhere around, I think, circa 94, late 94, early 95. And eventually, things start to develop, but in terms of the kind of the process behind the scenes that often doesn't get talked about, we often consider Mikami the father of survival horror and things like that. And in my research, one thing that was kind of cool to discover was how Koji Oda, who was one of the programmers on the original game and actually went on to work on as the director of Resident Evil 0, and I'll get back to that in a minute as well. He was already also starting to play with prototypes of a horror game proposed for the Super Nintendo, or sorry, the Super Famicom, I guess would be more proper to say for the snobs out there. And then Kenichi Iwao, who is, I should have prefaced that, I will hopefully not butcher these names as much as possible. IWAO is something that my brain just can't seem to translate very well into speaking. But he ended up coming on as kind of scenario writer and was able to come in as I think the Resident Evil fandom wiki says it came in, the original time was midway through development. Management was opposed to Shinji Mikami's disinterest in writing a script, and he reluctantly had the story changed. And Kenichi was the one who facilitated that. And there's some really good interviews that you can find about him and things of that nature. But a lot of the elements of like the virus umbrella, the kind of the character archetypes that became Chris, Jill, Barry, Wesker, Rebecca, most of that comes from him. And, it's the element of it being a team effort. But yeah, it's the game was eventually, as we all know, was launched March 22nd, 1996. And and then things kind of happened from there. So that's kind of like the elements of the development. But it was a pretty interesting deep dive when you go into it. So here's the prompt, I guess, to get questions and get discussion going. So the development team included these 5 names. And I've mentioned one already, but I want to see if you guys can catch what they all have in common. So these were folks that did scene development, scenario writing, programming, etc. So the names are Koji Oda, Hideki Kamiya, Haruki Kato, Yasuhiro Ampo, and Kyohiko Sakata. So what do you think those names have in common?
They all work at Capcom.
A lot of them went on to continue doing other Resident Evil games.
Exactly. Vanessa got it. All of those persons went on to direct other games in the franchise. And it's interesting, we've seen Resident Evil evolve, and we'll probably discuss that as we get into like the remake and how the series changed. But yet, both the Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remake, as well as 5, Revelations, and Code Veronica, have all had people who worked on the original game be at some point, it's at a rather high level of the development team. So anyway, that's kind of my initial...
Which makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which makes sense because like people who've worked on the initial project will know various aspects of production. And if another game is being produced, they will be brought on if they're available. So it makes sense that a lot of them would go on to develop newer Resident Evils.
It's pretty neat.
It's pretty cool. And I didn't have a chance to look through all the interviews because I forgot that these had even happened. But during around the 20th anniversary in 2016, they had done some series of videos with these with some of these persons who were at the time working on the Resident Evil 2 remake. And they have a video interview with Koji Oda from Resident Evil 0 because that was getting the HD remaster and things like that. But you can find those out there as well. I don't want to just simply parrot the same stuff because that's not exactly why you guys are all here. So,
right. I mean, what I think is interesting was that they did have that co-op footage like very brief amounts of it of like Chris and Jill together in the mansion, and that was kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, because that was probably the most surprising thing to find out in research over this episode was that the original idea was that there would be a co-op, but also an AI partner.
Which, yeah, God, that the idea didn't even come to fruition for another, or at least wasn't able to be like fully implemented for like another 5 or 6 years. All things considered. With
Zero, right?
Right.
Well, that's if you're talking about co-op, but the idea of an AI partner would eventually be completed in Resident Evil 2.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
You can count especially Ada. She does active shooting if Leon starts attacking.
Right.
So actually, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like somebody that was like with you for like almost the whole game.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, like a partner system where the game experience, yeah.
Yeah. No, but 2 seems more like accurate to like the spirit of what they were going for in the original.
Yeah, but I think as well, like, you're getting the limits of technology and not being really aware of what the PlayStation could do at that time.
Which is the sorry, just to mention about the technology is and also is time. One of the things I learned in a lot of the interviews is that a lot of people didn't believe in the project at the company, including most of the developers. And so they even, some of them looking back say like, we probably could have done some of that stuff. We just didn't have the time and the money to do it.
Which is funny because Resident Evil would eventually go on to be Capcom's biggest moneymaker, I think. It's either Resident Evil, Street Fighter, or Monster Hunter.
Yeah, I think the current biggest, like the most successful Capcom franchise, I believe at the moment is the Monster Hunter franchise, because Monster Hunter World just like pushed it way over, because that was a very consistent series, whereas Resident Evil has had like lots of gaps.
But the franchise as a whole has been one of Capcom's most successful cash cows.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, when you think Capcom,
it's very high up there.
Exactly. When you think Capcom, you think Street Fighter, Resident Evil, Mega Man. That's the stuff you think of.
100%. Also, wasn't like did they also toy around with first-person view mode for a while?
They did.
Yes. So I have some notes about that. So one thing I'm going to be mentioning as quite a bit and referencing is that Archipel is a documentary series you can watch on YouTube, and their latest project is Archipel Caravan. And as of this recording, there's one interview episode up with Shinji Mikami for his it's a anniversary of his 30th year in the video game industry. And he talks about how he stated the goal was to make the game first person, as he felt that was like the scariest way to experience it. And he felt that the pre-rendered backgrounds and thus the third person perspective were a result of just getting around the technological limitations. Because, for reference, the only like first person kind of games that were starting to come out on the PlayStation was like Kingsfield. And when you look at Kingsfield, I mean, that is incredibly primitive, like that. And was the other one. Jumping Flash was another one. But, and Mikami interestingly mentions this interview, he doesn't like the fixed camera system. He feels it's too remote from the experience.
And it's funny because I honestly feel the opposite most of the time, because like, and this actually harkens back to like what we were talking about with like RE8 stuff. They still won't show us Ethan's face, and they keep trying to use it. It's like, oh, like player avatar, you're in that guy's shoes. And I'm like, I don't care about myself in these situations. I care about this guy.
Yeah, and
that's why.
Sorry, Vanessa,
like,
go on.
I mean, just that, like, that's why the camera angles ended up working for me, because that I actually identify more with them when I can see them.
And the camera angles ratchet up the horror, because if you're in third person and you hear something crunching or squelching around a corner, you can't edge up and use the camera to see what's around the corner. You're relying more on what you're hearing to fill in the gap, and it's not a pretty sight.
Exactly. Well, and I was just playing Director's Cut, Arrange Mode, and Resident Evil Remake last night. in the range mode, they put dogs on the first floor hallway by the medicine room, the medicine save room on the west wing of the first floor.
Right.
And so I had to take out two of the dogs because, I mean, you start really underleveled in many respects, and that's why they give you so many guns so fast. And so there's this moment where I've taken out two, and I can hear the other dog down the corner, and I'm waiting for that damn thing to make its way over to me and trying to so there's that anticipation, right? That you're like, you inch a few steps to just try to get the AI to pathfind to you and get its animation loop to run at you and actually find you. And like that anticipation, I think you get from the fixed camera angles, and you don't quite get it from the first person, where there's almost like, because your view perspective has almost like too much agency in some respects.
Yeah, it is a sense of anticipation and dread. And I understand why a lot of people prefer first person, in that like it's up close and personal to them, and that's why they prefer it. But I still end up feeling that the opposite for me works. I like seeing them. I like the tension building of waiting for the enemy to come closer to you. And I mean, even the remakes of 2 and 3 kind of play around with that, even with the amount of camera control you have, because they still pull it kind of like close enough that like you can't see like infinitely. So there's still stuff around corners that you could hear.
Mm-hmm. It's also, just to quickly add, I feel like that's partly the level design, I think, elevates that.
Yeah.
They've designed it around that perspective.
It's made for it.
Yeah,
very
I think
specifically.
the thing about first-person shooters is that there's a sense of empowerment, because they're saying, you're the character. Well, you know, if I was playing Resident Evil, I'd get killed in the first or second room.
Yep, 100%.
But the fact that you're telling me, oh, you know, you're the character. No. You're telling me I'm the badass with the vast array of weapons, enemies that will explode when I shoot them.
And the training.
That goes along with that. That does not scare me. That is empowering. That is... That is not a horror game. And this might be blasphemy, but I don't consider Doom a horror game, because you're tearing through things. You're not cowering in fear.
Yeah, the original Doom has a mood that is creepy, but a lot of that, again, is that build-up of anticipation, and a lot of that's from the level design. But that's at least my feeling, because I agree with you. Especially when you look at how Doom evolved, like even straight into Doom 2. Doom 2 is not scary. But
just kind of go back to my point before we get straight off topic there. With the fixed camera angle, there is a detachment that actually creates more fear, because you're watching this character. Yes, you might be in control of it, but you're watching them in what can end up being a helpless situation. And what's kind of helped in recent years is the fact that the death graphics have become more graphic. You can see someone's throat being torn out. And in the original Resident Evil, if you got killed by a zombie, your character collapses and the zombie is chowing down on them, mimicking that iconic scene with the first zombie. That's terrifying. And I'm kind of glad Capcom decided to go with the fixed camera angle.
Yeah.
Agreed. Regarding the fixed camera, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I was curious, because I know the three of us have discussed this on streams and different games and LPs and stuff, is the use of technology to expand on it. And I was reminded, this keeps coming back in my mind, building fear and tension with how a fixed camera can also guide like a director and guide the imagery. And I was thinking of that bit in Song of Horror where Paul, you remember this, where the camera panned down with the woman at the dinner table, or the doll at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And the camera suddenly comes in and you can like see through the doll's head. Like,
yeah,
there's so many techniques I think it can use.
Yeah, you get a lot of very unique ways to portray a scene and also tension.
Especially like if you could bring in something like a Dutch tilt, because straight away that's creating a tone for the room or for the scene. And you don't get that in a first person shooter.
But yeah, so in terms of the development, I'm trying to look up some other things. Oh yeah, so as I mentioned that there was the person who was kind of the main credited story writer, or one of the main persons who contributed the story, Kenichi Iwao. Again, apologies on the pronunciation. So he had actually became known as a story writer or a scenario planner at Capcom, and he even mentions that when you're and quote from the interview, honestly, there isn't really a job where you only write a scenario for a game, because even with Biohazard, I had to make a game flowchart and make a map with events, which is quite different from just writing. And before this, he had worked on another fantastic Capcom game from the same period, Demon's Crest, in kind of a similar fashion. And he also mentioned in terms of we're talking about agency and fear and tension. And one of the cool things, obviously, about the game is the limited ammunition and resources. Now, it sounds like he was one of the proponents of pushing for that, you're gonna limit the resources. But I mean, as we experienced when we ourselves tried Sweet Home recently, that's also a legacy of that. But he mentioned another interesting inspiration point was a roguelike game from the MSX called Alcazar: The Forgotten Fortress. Interesting thing is that that's another game where you basically go through randomized layouts of castles basically, and then have to find whatever resources you can and try to survive. And that's kind of the interesting thing to me about the way that Resident Evil also, when you consider the arrange mode and the battle modes and some of these and especially you see it's a game that people have started to do randomizer mods to then randomize positions, randomize rooms. Each room leads to a different room that is supposed to on the map. And it's very interesting stuff. Anyway, just want to make sure that detail was partly made come forward.
Yeah, no, that is neat.
Yeah. Resident Evil, though, is a game that has quite a few references to other properties, either as tributes or just plain lifted. I mean, you can see this with every enemy in the game. So, obviously, you've got the zombies, who are quite obviously from Romero's Living Dead film, Dead films.
Right.
You've got the spiders, which were a staple of every B-movie horror from the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
The dogs, I've learned, were kind of a reference more to, especially because they're Dobermans. There was a very short spate of dog horror films in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And they tend to...
I was just going to say, obviously, the Omen sequence.
The Omen being one, but I mean, a lot of the times they use Dobermans because they're a terrifying breed of dog.
Yeah, I've met a few.
But, you've got some blatantly obvious ones as well. You've got Neptune, which is a reference to Jaws. Plant 42 is a reference to Little Shop of Horrors, which, looking back now, is not that surprising.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not.
But two of the surprising ones would be the Hunters and the Chimeras. So the Hunters, with their clicking of their claws as they walk, the fact that they can use doors, they're very intelligent, they screech, they're reptilian. They're the raptors from Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
And the most chilling ones of all would be the Chimeras. Because not only are they a reference to David Cronenberg's The Fly, they're physically resembling Martin Brundle in The Fly 2.
Yeah, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but God.
Yeah. There's a lot of references throughout and tributes throughout the game, which you really only kind of realize on a deep dive like this, because it's not something you notice, but when you do, you really start to appreciate it more.
Yeah, it's very much a love letter to the genre, and I think it's very telling to me that part of Resident Evil and also the original Silent Hill's success comes from a sense of passion that is put into it. In the case of like Silent Hill, they said that they didn't want to do externalized horror, monsters. You know, they wanted to do something that matched the horror, the American horror that they were interested in, which was like the works of like Stephen King, Ira Levin, and etc. And then when you have with Resident Evil, though, it's like, yeah, like it's the ultimate B movie video game.
Creature feature.
Yeah,
Resident Evil is a love letter to the B movies of like the 50s through the 80s.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Silent Hill is a love letter to psychological horror films like Rosemary's Baby. And I know that's a weird one to actually bring up, but it's just the fact that there are quite strong psychological themes throughout that film. And it kind of comes up as well throughout Silent Hill. It is psychological horror at its best. Silent Hill.
Miss you, Silent Hill.
To Silent Hill. Yeah.
Side note, miss you.
Yeah. The
Gone but never forgotten.
yes, indeed. Yeah, there was another note. I actually lost my train of thought because it's distraction by Silent Hill. Oh yes, okay. The other thing regarding development, this is a funny story, and I love that it gets brought up in Kenichi's interview, and he doesn't. It's not until that moment it suddenly hits him like, oh yeah. So, a fascinating fact. Many devs from the original Resident Evil, including one of the room designers, the scenario and story writer, Kenichi, one of the character designers, an effects programmer designer, various modelers, all worked on Parasite Eve 2.
That tracks.
Yeah, you can kind of see some of the hallmarks there.
Yeah. As if Square's blatant, we want to turn this into our own Resident Evil wasn't blatant enough, right?
Yeah, no. Parasite Eve 2 is very, very Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
Although with some of its Final Fantasy elements, you're kind of wondering, were they trying to make Final Evil or Resident Fantasy?
I mean, I'd argue that it just kind of became, the first game at least was very much its own thing. I know that was very common to say, yeah, because the Fantasy Evil or, it was, or Final Evil, etc. was very, that was a common term I remember in the game magazines, but I don't know. I don't want to get distracted too much about Parasite Eve, but I always feel like it's its own beast, and that's again one of the reasons.
Can always do a one-off salute to Parasite Eve someday.
Yeah. Going back through my notes, Paul, I found something you might find interesting. One of the big inspirations for the way that the mansion is explored and has been a kind of a constant, he said it's been a constant inspiration in general, but he said it did inspire him for Resident Evil, was he was a big fan of the fighting fantasy books by Livingston and Jackson.
Yeah, I love those.
I had a feel, yeah. So I was like, I think Paul's gonna like that factoid.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
There is actually a very similar flow between those old books, which, folks, if you don't know what they were, they're choose your own adventure. So you'd start off at like chapter 1 and you'd get sent to chapter 15 or 16 or something. Every choice you made would have like eventually lead you to either the end of the story or you getting killed in some assways manner. So much fun.
Yeah, they're good. They're good stuff. They're very good stuff.
Makes a lot of sense that choose your own adventure style books were an inspiration for the layout. Like that does definitely have that feeling in the Spencer estate.
Yeah, because there's a very similar flow. Because you could start off on one side of the mansion or go to the other side, but you're still limited in that, well, you can go so far here, you have to go over here now to continue on.
Yeah, it's like you have to get a certain set of items in order to progress, but how you unlock the doors and like what order you want to unlock the rooms once you have that key is kind of left up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you do find a sword key as well.
Hey, that's right.
Hey.
Does that, one of the things we were wanting to do is just kind of dive into the first game. I mean, this feels like a good segue to go into that. Because, I obviously we played this for our Let's Play channel just a couple of months ago. Yeah. And I was reviewing it recently, or last night, basically, or last couple of days. One thing I find really interesting about the original Resident Evil is that it is pretty non-linear for exploring the mansion. There's kind of there's certain, as we're saying, there's certain barricades, but even sometimes when you get certain keys is kind of up to you.
Yeah, but you're still kind of like, there is a non-linear aspect to it, but at the end of the day, it's still, you will have to go to this point to continue on. You have various checkpoints, so you're always going to have to go through the courtyard to get to the gatehouse, the guardhouse. So it doesn't matter what order you get the emblems to open up the courtyard, you still have to go through there.
That's a good point.
It's having these places where it meets up, whereas like the minute to minute aspect of it is left more up to you. Like how you get to that point is still more in your hands, but yeah, there's, in order to just like get through the narrative and get through the game, there's always going to be a certain amount of actions that you have to take in order to progress.
Yeah, you're always going to have to find a key to get to an emblem to open up the next door and all that. So I mean, like, you still have to follow a somewhat linear path. It just branches off, not in minor ways, but in ways that can make a playthrough quite different.
That's what I was. Yeah, it's exactly what I was kind of getting at. What it reminds me.
I mean, especially the original though, because I actually felt like it had more variety in the choices that you can make, which were mostly in regards to your secondary partner character.
Yeah, but also kind of like depending on which character you had. So I mean, like if you play as Jill, you're going to get access to different areas before Chris could.
Yeah, that too. It definitely changes things up.
I guess the thing that I was also getting at, just maybe not necessarily, you guys, clarify the point. It feels like in some sense, because I see what you're saying, like it's not necessarily nonlinear the way that like super very open-ended sandbox games are, the way we define nonlinear, but it's sort of like we're given this list of objectives and the order in which we perform those objectives is something that we can decide. And it's interesting playing the game, especially because, I've done elements of like either trying to speedrun it because I'm trying to, and when I say speedrun, I mean in quotation marks, because I'm just trying to get the damn rocket launcher. But then also like there's a more leisurely pace, or because there's certain cutscenes that you want to see. There's different pathings that allow you to encounter certain, sequences, or, certain, even adding like a challenge to yourself, like deciding, no, I'm going to play as Jill, but I'm going to wait till I get the broken shotgun. I'm not going to get it early.
Yeah.
Which I think it's really interesting with the way that Arrange mode and Director's Cut really, really remixes the item locations.
Big yikes.
Yeah, but when you're playing as Jill, you're kind of thinking like you don't really need the shotgun for most of it when you grab the bazooka almost straight away.
True. I mean, I guess because I've thought of long game about like, oh god, I need to save that for the chimeras. I need to save that for the hunters in the underground. I need to save that for tyrants. So it's like my brain is like, no, I don't want to just use that on zombies away with the shotgun. No. But it's a good point though. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me as well. As much content as there is in the game, there was quite a few pieces cut out. And going back to weapons, the Magnum was originally going to be a slightly upgraded version of the handgun. So it wasn't like the one-shot kill it would eventually become. You would actually have to get dum-dum bullets to actually have a chance of killing a zombie or an enemy in 1 or 2 hits.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing the item listing for the dum bullets back in the day. Like I think it was like on a website. I was like, oh look at these, like, stuff that didn't make it into the main game.
Yeah, but I think they eventually just decided, you're adding a complication you don't really need. Just amp the power of the Cold Python.
Yeah.
And just make the ammo scarce.
Mm-hmm. Which, good God, do they ever.
But they were apparently going to add that in the remake. But again, decided, you don't really need the dum can't talk. You don't need the dum bullets. You can just have the Magnum.
Yeah.
Right.
Although, I mean, I'll bring that up in the remake segment about finding the Magnum in that game.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, and it's also, I feel like some of that is like a pacing thing, because ammo types really feel like something you need to get within the first act of the game, or you need to introduce, because otherwise, if you're, because the Magnum typically comes into the game around like the middle to late Act 2, depending on which game in the series it is, but it definitely happens pretty late.
Or very early Act 3.
Right, or very early Act 3. Yeah, exactly. And it's like at that point, if you're adding an extra complication, you're just dragging that pacing out. But I mean, mind you, I've been playing Evil Within, and that seems to be Mikami's thing. So I guess that tracks.
Dragging it out unnecessarily is Evil Within 1 in a nutshell.
But
That's it. That's the game.
other content included, well, originally Resident Evil was going to be a far different game. It was going to be far more futuristic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the cast was going to be quite different.
Yep.
Everybody was going to be a cyborg. Two other characters would have been the support characters for Chris and Jill, including, I think, let me just look at my note.
Wasn't one of them named Dewey?
There would have been Dewey, but also a cybernetic character called Gelzer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The big slab of meat.
Yeah.
With the cyborg parts.
Gelzer would have saved one of the characters if they'd got caught in the ceiling trap, where you get, like, if you don't deactivate the trap, you get trapped in a room and the ceiling's coming down. Eventually, when they decided that the game probably could do with being more contemporary, Gelzer eventually became Barry Burton. So he's not as massive as Gelzer was in the original art, but still takes on the big guy role. The other character would have been an African American officer called Dewey, who would have been the comic relief character. He got cut very quickly because they kind of realized what he would have represented or possibly implicated. So,
right.
I think they were going to stylize him on Eddie Murphy, I believe.
Eddie Murphy or Chris Rock.
They mentioned that?
Right. He looks more Chris Rock, but yeah, it's a. I'm kind of curious about that. It's interesting, actually. Rick in Dino Crisis feels like an interesting evolution of that character in some respects to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that they kind of ended up using some of the more futuristic aspects for Dino Crisis.
God, yeah. Dino Crisis with cyborgs. Oh wait, nope, sorry, never mind. That just gave me Dino Crisis 3 flashbacks. Nope, abort.
No, bad Chris. No, bad.
Well, I mean, there's still a chance that we could get Barry some cyborg parts in the future.
I'd be down with that.
Hey, Chris,
Cyborg
Jill,
Barry.
look at these guns.
See, that's how he gets around being old. He just goes, I don't need my Colt Python anymore. I have this, and it's just like a rocket hand.
Yeah, it's like the rocket hand version of the I wanted to call it the Dragon Punch gauntlets, the ones from Resident Evil 7, the one that Joe Baker gets.
Oh yeah. I was also thinking of Devil May Cry 5 with Nero's arm.
Oh yeah, no, that's another one. Yeah.
I just want to point out as well. So, the game is set in 1998. Barry Burton's 38 in that game.
Yeah. Same with Wesker.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god. But
Yeah, we're old now.
one character that was almost cut was Rebecca. And it
I
seems
didn't know that they'd almost cut her.
yeah, apparently Shinji Mikami was the only one of the crew who did not like Rebecca because he did not want a submissive character. A submissive female character. But the rest of the team actually fought to keep her in. And I don't think she's actually submissive. I think she's a
No.
teenage girl who's had a very shitty couple of days and has probably got some frayed nerves at the moment.
Yeah, and
It's
I
very
think
it's very understandable what she's going through.
yeah, and it kind of bugs me that if he thought that about Rebecca, then maybe for Zero, you don't go the way that you did, which kind of minimized Rebecca's contributions when like teaming up with Billy. Like mechanically, you almost never want to play as her because she takes so much extra damage than Billy does. And oh look, she can't move things because she's, got small girly arms.
Yeah.
But she's good at like making herbs because Billy is too like meathead to like shove two plants together.
Billy make gun go bang bang, not make heels go heel heel.
It's a baffling decision.
I imagine Billy just going, okay, I could do two things. I can shoot really good, and I can play a mean piano. That's all I got.
That's it. That's all I have. What do you got? And Rebecca's like, chemicals?
And apparently I'm perpacneal.
Right, yes.
Yeah, she ends up carrying a lot of the stuff. Like, if that's how you felt about her, you had a very good opportunity to make her a little bit more active. And
Yeah.
mechanically, you really didn't. And, I mean, as a character, Rebecca is totally fine. She's the medic. She's not supposed to be going in guns blazing anyway.
She's rear echelon. She stays behind.
Mm-hmm.
She shouldn't be in a combat situation to begin with.
Yeah, like, the idea is she's not supposed to. She's supposed to heal the people in the fight that, like, are doing the fighting.
I mean, if anything, you don't have somebody in a helicopter looking for murderers. Like, if you have somebody like Rebecca, you keep her back at base and bring her out if there is an incident. You don't stick her on a helicopter when you're looking for cannibalistic murderers.
Well, I mean, Stars doesn't make great decisions.
They don't. No, I was gonna say like there's a baffling logic to the whole Bravo team, Alpha team, the whole lineup of the characters and their jobs and like everyone has the one thing they do. There's many things that's like okay, so it's not uniform training, and it's
the Stars. I think were more like because at that time you did have this idea that policing should be more community based. So the Stars, while technically an equivalent to, say, maybe SWAT, would also be have a diverse skill set that they could do anything. Especially because I can't see somewhere like the RPD having a large crime scene investigation unit. It'd be more like a couple of officers have the training. Well, now you've got a couple of Stars officers who are specialized in chemical analysis or medical training. Rebecca's a doctor. She can do an autopsy.
Yeah, I think they were kind of geared towards anti-terrorism and that sort of thing as a group.
It's very inconsistent, which is a hallmark of Resident Evil.
definitely.
I mean, the thing that very really interested me was that the original setup was that Bravo team got in the helicopter and flew out to supposedly the hideout of the cannibal murderers and then disappeared. And ever since then, it's just no, they went looking for them and then disappeared. Not the hideout. That house is not their hideout. Definitely not.
Yeah, because you'd think okay, well, there's been a number of cannibalistic murders. We're going to send out half our team in a helicopter to take on the cannibals.
The B squad.
Why are you not sending the entire team and several dozen cops?
Mm-hmm. And
No, the B squad.
Right, B squad.
They're fine.
And then, there's a whole thing of the geography and how do they find out that it's there? There's a lot of weird logic questions. Because essentially if they're raiding, we went up to the hideout of the group and disappeared, which is what the original game states. That's a raid situation.
Yeah.
That is where you're, as we're saying, at least 3 or 4 more cop cars, plus the whole squad, plus a battle plan. Jill's supposed to be, what is it? Delta Force is where she's supposed to.
Yeah, she's ex Delta Force, and she's a bomb disposal expert.
At 23.
Geez. At 23.
23.
Oh
but just to chime in there as well, if you actually look at all the Stars members, so you look at, say, Alpha Team, you've got Barry, who's a backup man, but also a weapons supervisor. You've got Joseph, who's an Omni-Man who can do anything. You've got Chris, who's the point man, who's straight ahead and the sharpshooter. You've got Jill, who's bringing up the rear. You've got Wesker as the team leader. That's the frontline team. Who do you have with Bravo team? The communications expert, the medic. Who else? The maintenance guy and part-time shooter, and the chemist.
I think my head just exploded.
they front loaded all of their best fighters onto Alpha team, and then like all of their scientists on Bravo team, and then decided, let's send out Bravo team first so that they can science at the cannibal murderers.
Maybe this was all part of Wesker's long game to get rid of all those darn nerds that were stinking up the joint.
I need combat data on the Stars members versus my monsters. I think I'll send in Bravo team first, because fuck those nerds.
But sir, would you actually rather get combat data from the people who actually served in the military?
Later. Nerds first.
But
Nerds
they're going to get
first.
slaughtered. We're not going to get much information from them.
I will get satisfaction.
Complete global satisfaction.
Exactly.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
okay. This is Resident Evil 1, so to be fair, he doesn't have that voice yet. He just has his like regular like.
Kind of squeaky voice.
Yeah, a
It's
little
like,
bit.
oh, Chris, you're alive. Thank God.
Chris, where are you, Chris? Wow, we missed you, Chris. Now to
Yeah.
go evil.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. I had to run away. I had my reasons. Perhaps you've met them? You know, the monsters? And it's like, thanks, Wesker.
Yeah, the voice acting in 1 is just all over the place.
Yeah. And according to some of the interviews I looked up, Kenichi being one and some other former dev team members, they've all kind of said, yeah, Mikami chose them all based on looks, and none of the dev team was happy with the voice acting. Reportedly, there was a Japanese language track also recorded that was really bad and was worse.
Yeah,
And-
apparently Mikami did not like the idea of an American game, well, a game set in America, and the entire cast speaking in Japanese.
Right. Which, you know, and I totally understand that. I get that. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think what's amusing in two ways about this is that Mikami has since said, you know, I chose for looks and not acting ability. And he said it kind of is implied like within less than a year after the game was done, he realized, yeah, that was a bad idea. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror stories from when they were filming the live action introduction, and not the zombie kind of horror. There's
Oh no.
because apparently there's a young woman, she's called Inza or something, or Inez,
Inez?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
think it's Inez.
who plays Jill, and from what I understand, she was 17
Yep.
and kind of far too young to be acting that kind of role. And I mean, like, this is a young woman, she's in a foreign country doing a very difficult shoot. It was not easy for her, and I think it kind of showed afterwards. But there's also another story about Charlie Kravlovsky, who played Chris in the live action, had to have his hair bleached to kind of matches Chris's character art. They used straight up peroxide to do it. And they turned his hair, which was actually nearly black, to nearly red.
Wow.
So it's kind of why it's shot in black and white.
Yeah. You also can tell when you watch the color version that the even though I mean the cinematographer did a pretty good job, but yeah, Wesker's hair is also
He looks like
Yeah.
Johnny Bravo.
He does.
Oh, mama.
He really does. He still does
Yeah.
to this day.
yeah, he forever Johnny Bravo.
But another kind of thing just to dispel is that the actress in Inez is not the Canadian or Irish actresses called Una Kavanagh. The Canadian Una Kavanagh was the actress who voiced Jill in the game. From what I understand, the Irish Una Kavanagh was actually still in school when Resident Evil was being made.
Well, today I learned.
Yeah. Barry's voice actor, Barry Yerd, I'm not even going to pronounce his proper name.
He's very hurt now.
Yeah. Is a Norwegian actor. While Chris's voice actor is Scott McCulloch. And I'm not sure what happened to him after Resident Evil.
Oh, yeah, the voice actor for Chris, he, I believe, passed away in the year 2000. I've looking at the IMDb page here because my understanding is that he's also the voice of Richter Belmont in the Symphony of the Night intro sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember hearing about that a while back.
So he passed away about 20 years ago. But
yeah, it was a car accident.
Bummer. Oh man. Okay, he also, now that I'm actually looking up Scott McCulloch's credits, he is also he's Paul Phoenix in the first 2 Tekken games.
Oh.
And he's one of the he plays a fleeing survivor in both House of the Dead 1 and 2.
Aw. I've played House of the Dead too. Played a lot of it back in the day.
Yeah. God, yeah, those were very good games.
It's interesting that like the voice acting, which is, like everybody laughs at it. It's hilarious. It still ends up really fitting in with that salute to old monster movie feeling that like they were going for. It kind of ends up being very appropriate.
Yeah.
It does.
But I think as well,
Yeah.
it's appropriate because they didn't have enough of a budget for the live action sequence.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, it has a budget. It has more budget than I expected, like when I think of it today, I think it's the fact that there was so much tokusatsu TV shows in the 90s, because they still had to make the molds for those dogs, and they still have to have an explosives license to set off the charges and do the blanks, and they still have to find a location. The lighting budget for night photography is still super expensive when you shoot on film,
Also, in the like uncut version, the gore scenes for like the victims that had been eaten.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
It's probably the best part for me. It's like it's genuinely well done and looks good.
Yeah, it's disgusting and disturbing.
Yeah.
It's very fulgy.
As part of our research for this episode, Chris found the uncut intro for the game, and it's hilarious because there's actually one bit where the dogs are chasing the team, and obviously they've got like the heads of the dogs made up as puppets or something like that, so they're not using real dogs, obviously. But one of the dogs gets shot, and however they set up the charge, the ears pop off and the nose shoots out in a split second. And it's just so funny.
Yep. It's just a case of, you get what you get and you just hope it works. I mean, I love how much it adds though to the original Resident Evil to see those effects. And I remember as a kid playing it for the first time, it just like, because I already at that point, I loved monster movies, and it just was like, it's like a movie. It was so cool. And it felt so like, I don't know, just because it was a video game that I was playing, it felt so much more attainable. So like as a aspiring filmmaker at that time, it felt like something so cool. It just, again, as we're saying, like it's like this is true love for the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really felt like it worked for the tone that they were going for. And I mean, despite all of how entirely goofy that whole segment is and how goofy the voice acting is overall, that's still the game out of the series that creeped me out the most, like to this day.
Yeah, because it's a very visceral scene, and it stays with you. I mean, I still remember the first time I saw that scene, or even like when you load up the game and Chris is walking in the corridor, and he starts to scream and just zooms in on his eye as just there's a giant blood spurt. That stays with you, and no other Resident Evil has kind of captured that B-movie-esque horror. Actually, speaking of Chris, and this is going to be the last piece of trivia I have, he's actually modeled on Michael Biehn's Hicks from Aliens.
Is it Michael Biehn or is it Michael Biehn? I've always known it as Michael Biehn.
No idea.
I just go with I before E, so Bienh.
Yeah, true. Good point.
If I'm wrong, Mr. Bean or Bean, please don't come after me and kill me. I'm sorry, please. No.
Oh, as far as I know, he's a very sweet guy.
Before E, except after aliens.
But
Oh God.
you can actually kind of see it though in Chris because his hair is very similar to Hicks's hair.
Yeah.
The fact that his team is decimated by a traitor who's actually got interests with an evil corporation. But also, what kind of really tips it over is the flamethrower is actually specifically designed on the flamethrower from Aliens.
Yeah, I've always loved. I remember noticing that and realizing, oh yeah, real flamethrowers don't look like the one in Aliens, but the one in Resident Evil does. Huh. I always love that. Yeah, when it comes to the firearms in the game, I've always enjoyed that there's that element that's clearly another movie reference thing. Is like the Berettas, obviously from because they're cops, so it's Lethal Weapon or Die Hard. Remington shotgun, which is pretty common. Actually, the Remington 870 they use looks like it's definitely inspired by the one from Brain. Zombie, excuse me, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, because that and that explodes heads. So that's another piece of connective tissue. And then obviously the 4-barrel rocket launcher is Commando, clearly. So it's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of the thing that really made it scary over all of the other ones is there is a greater sense of loneliness because you're almost always completely on your own. Like, yeah, Jill might be able to meet up with Barry, but he keeps fucking off. And Rebecca says, I'll come with you, and then goes, I'll meet up with you later.
Could you please clear the way first?
Okay.
I'd prefer if you went first, okay? Thank you. Great.
So, like, there's this isolation, but combine that with the soundtrack and the sound effects, and you get this really, really unsettling feeling even when there's nothing there.
You always feel on the edge of your seat in that mansion and in every other section of the game.
Definitely. You know, the other thing...
The music's such a big part of it, like, so big.
It is, yeah. And actually, I always keep forgetting who is the lead composer on this one, because I think it was 2 or 3 composers, so I'm going to look it up again. Masami Ueda, Makoto Tomozawa, and Akari Kaida. Man, wow. 3 names that you see on a lot of Capcom games. Yeah, they were the main folks that did the score for the first game, and we were talking about this on the Let's Play, that there's a certain discordancy that you get out of it, that, you know, with the way, especially the way the strings and piano are very like synthetic feeling. And it sort of adds that strange, like, it's familiar, but there's something kind of wrong. That's always what kind of gets to me really nicely.
Yeah, I really love that about it. And I mean, and combine that with, like, say, that hallway, the green hallway, like after the dog hallway, the same one that has like the bathroom and like the shotgun room off of it. Later on in the game, that was probably like one of the scariest places for me because you had the creepy music, but then you heard click, 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 screech.
Yeah. And
there's a fucking hunter, and you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, like, the hunters really, when they get introduced, they ramp up whatever terror you're feeling, because up until that point, you face enough zombies that you know you have so much distance you can use. You can, you know a way you can kind of, like, deal with them. The hunters completely throw that out the window.
They do. They wreck everything, and they are just, the screech is just completely horrible, and they've never quite gotten that same tone for them since then.
Yeah, the screech, there's a theory in biology that there's a certain frequency that when a human hears it, it actually triggers one of our most primal instincts, that's fear, and that when we hear this frequency, we kind of seize up in terror. And you really see this, well, you really hear this, I should say, when a tiger roars, because it has that right frequency that when you hear it, you freeze up, and that's what the hunters are doing. It's tapping into that kind of, oh shit, there's something coming after me.
I've always found it interesting with monster sound effects, to this note, because like this comparison, right? It feels like monster sound effects in general have gotten less distinctive, more homogenous. And I'm not sure entirely if it's because people just keep seeking eternally the sound that is more natural, more clean. Because I know, I work with sound guys on film stuff, and it's like it's a good clean sound, and a clean recording is cool, but there's sort of an artistry I find to doing good monster sounds. Like we see this with like kaiju movies. Like I love Pacific Rim, but like none of the monster sounds in that movie are distinctive. I can't tell Knifehead and Otachi apart at all. And the thing with the hunters is like the hunters in some of the newer games do sound very good. I do like the hunters in the remake, for instance. It's not as terrifying to sound, but it's a cool sound. But like
remake 3 came the closest to making the hunters like they were in 1.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And it makes sense that the two appearances of the hunters that use the old sound effects, I think that's both Survivor and in Resident Evil 3, it's like those are definitely more effective. That's a really strong sound effect that created that effect, is what you're saying, Paul, about, because I love that concept. I've heard that same thing. It's like there's a certain frequency, a certain rumbles that like shake us, and I'm just kind of, just like I'm intrigued by that. Like, I'm thinking out loud more than anything of like, gosh, I wonder how much of that was a technical limitation, how much of that was just the design, because I know in the 90s, distinctive creature sound effects, happened a lot in monster movies in Japan. So it's just, I don't know, something to think
But
about.
a lot of the time, like, whenever you had, like, a monster or something screaming or roaring or making any sort of noise, it's a real animal noise being mixed or slowed or sped up. So it's more of a case of people have heard these animals being used so many times. Like, you've heard the tigers roar, you've heard, like, a wolf howl, you've heard lions, or you've heard roars, you've heard barks, you've heard screeches, and nothing is original anymore. Nothing is kind of like, nothing sounds new. But you're also getting technology now where you don't need to sample an elephant and a lion and mix them to make a T-Rex. You've got a synthesizer now for that.
Also, the original Tyrant really didn't have an actual like vocalization monster sound.
He has like a couple of growls, but he doesn't have like a roar the way that like Nemesis does.
Yeah, or even Mr. X at the very end of the B scenario kind of does.
Well, Tyrant's a strong silent type.
Yeah. Nobody really knows what is going on in his head. But I do also wanted to add that chimeras are like the MVP for me, because like they're one of my favorite monsters in the entire series, and I'm kind of sad that we really never got to see them again.
But I'm also kind of glad we never got to see them again.
Yeah, I mean, there's that too. Like they're completely horrifying and like very creepy. Like the hunters gave me a much more visceral reaction because they killed me, but like the chimeras like stick with me as like a lingering like, ugh, these guys are so creepy.
I'm kind of glad we never got a more up-to-date remake, because I can imagine you'd get a full face-on view of a chimera, and that's something I don't want to see. I actually feel sick whenever I see like a close-up of a fly's head. I just feel like I have to throw up.
Oh no! Oh, sorry to hear that, dude. Because because believe me, if there's a petition that says bring the chimeras back for Resident Evil 8 or 9, and it's like I'm gonna fucking sign it twice. But
I mean, I'm glad they weren't overused, but I would love to see them again in like some capacity.
But imagine if when you'd fought the tyrant and you're trying to get out of the lab, and the chimeras had gotten out of the power section.
Oh
Oh
God.
man.
Oh man, I'm just thinking of the few times you have to fight the dogs and Mr. X at the same time in Resident Evil Survivor, and nope, 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 nope.
Oh, actually, that with the chimeras in the power section, and then RE3 remakes
I was gonna
Brain
mention that.
Demos.
Yep.
Yeah, in their own power section. It's a very similar kind of callback. I mean, I don't think it was entirely intentional, but
I think it's probably the heat.
it's neat. I just think it's neat.
You just think it's neat. Just hold up that potato.
Chimera and their Brain Demos cousin was just like, why do we always hang out in the power section? And the head's just like, holds up a map. I just think it's neat.
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's
mean,
good.
I also, for like the original, I do genuinely enjoy how much of it is revealed to you throughout the game by finding the notes.
Yes.
The notes really kind of help ratchet up the terror, because
Yeah.
another thing that got cut was that you would actually find messages written in blood all over the mansion.
Wow.
And you can actually see this nowadays on the emulator if you actually change the color palette, because what they ended up doing with the letters, the messages, was just they just changed the red or the brown to the matching color. But if you change the color on the emulator, you should see the original messages.
And my understanding, some people have theorized, at least, or speculated, I've seen, some of those messages are George Trevor messages, right?
Oh, well, his whole subplot did get cut out of the original.
Yeah.
And then put back in for the remake.
Plus, like, when did George Trevor die? In the 60s?
Yeah, like 1967 or 8, I believe.
So I'd kind of say, like, 30 years later, they're not going to leave the blood messages on the wall. If they're,
So, yeah, as I mentioned, it's
Yeah.
it's speculation.
I'd say it'd be more like they're killing us, or essentially
Yeah.
just versions of Itchy Tasty.
Yep.
Ah, zombies. There are zombies here? Forget it.
The blood messages I could see just being like, he's gone crazy, they're killing us, we've doomed ourselves, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's wild to think about that, because there's two things about that. You know, the files existed in some respects in Sweet Home, and was obviously a staple of other point and click adventure games, as well as especially like the stuff like the Laura Bow games and some of the Sierra stuff and some of the LucasArts stuff. And Alone in the Dark obviously had some elements of like reading files for plot detail and things like that. But thinking about the blood on the walls with messages, man, that's like so many years before it became common to do environmental storytelling, you know, before the idea was popularized.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that thing was all over the original Bioshock.
Yeah. Which Bioshock came out around the same year as Portal, right? Because Portal was where like people really took notice of it.
It was 2007, I believe.
Yeah. Give it a check. Yeah, they came out the same year. Interesting coincidence. Weird.
But I think you also had Valve doing environmental storytelling with Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, there was a bunch of that in Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, because basically what happened was the environmental storytelling kind of sort of begins, people say, in Half-Life 2 in 2004. Yeah, Portal and Bioshock, and then, yeah, Left 4 Dead, which was about a year later, like those really like pushed, like, you know, here we're actually telling you like real character stories. Which, bringing back to Resident Evil, I love that you sort of gain this connection to that place and that location through these journals and letters that you read, and you learn about these characters. And like, I feel sorry for Martin
Yeah, but then it
Cracklin.
turns into Hotel California. You've checked in. You're never checking out of that place.
Yeah, it's really it's nice how they give like some little bits of humanity to like certain scientist characters that you never really actually get to meet. They're just these notes, but like also there's tip-offs about Wesker not being who he says he is, and you could pick up on that if you read the notes and you were like really paying attention, but otherwise it would just hit you at the end.
Yeah, it's presented in such a way that unless you're actually reading between the lines, you can easily miss it.
Yeah, it's they actually took the early references to Wesker out in the remake, and that kind of bummed me out. I wish it was still in there.
I mean, one thing I'm always going to miss, if they ever decide to actually do another remake, is you're never going to get that sense of, oh crap, when you power up that projector and you see Wesker in Umbrella uniform.
Yeah.
Simply because you're probably never going to see a projector in the game again.
It's just Wesker has become so ubiquitous with the series that seeing him again, and even in like a remake aspect, is just not going to have the same impact that it did originally. Although, I mean, part of me kind of wishes that they would do it again, just to get a chance to have an actual canon scenario, which we still do not have, and we never will.
Yeah,
probably
because if you play as Chris, you never actually find out what happened to Barry.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, he's possibly still out there. And then if he plays Jill, it's like, well, Rebecca who?
Yeah, but I just kind of imagine, though, because most people think of Chris's scenario being the canon one, I just like to imagine Barry's in some clear in the Arklay Mountains. There's a pile of the Cerberus corpses. And he's just making like little pinecone versions of the Star Steam. He's like, you would never leave me behind, Pinecone Brad.
He's got his own team now, and they're all just pine cones. I mean, like Umbrella Chronicles kind of does that, where it's like you have Chris and Jill together, and they find Rebecca, but where's Barry?
Nobody cares about Barry.
And I'm like, well, we all care about.
We all love,
Barry.
everybody loves Barry.
Barry's like the team dad.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. He
And he has
totally is.
this.
He's totally the team dad. Yeah.
And he gets divorced to the team mom, Wesker.
I was so happy when he came back for Revelations 2.
Oh, dude.
I was
Yeah.
so happy he rescued Jill in the canon end for Resident Evil 3.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I'm kind of sad that we never got that option in the remake of 3. I would have loved to have had Barry.
I mean, for some this might be considered blasphemous, but you know, it was a case of, it seems it was very much a budget situation with the 3 remake. I would trade Dario for Barry in a heartbeat.
Well, yeah, because Dario didn't really even get the impact of him being in there.
Exactly.
You don't even go back to see him get eaten.
Yeah, like that's my point. It's like if Dario as a character only really has importance if you actually go back to the warehouse later and then see him dead.
Otherwise, you could have actually just killed him off there and then. You could have just had his body in the container, the door open, his throat torn out or something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess
Oh, that just made me. I'm sorry. That just made me have this awesome thought that we haven't seen in a while in a Resident Evil game. Is because often it's like they eat the body and they munch on stuff and whatnot. One of my favorite parts of the original game is the fact that it isn't just the first zombie isn't just eating Kenneth. It has torn his head off and is eating it.
Yeah, clean.
Which means
clean off.
Clean off. He's not coming off. He's not coming back. And I'm just like had this thought of like you have the headless corpse of Dario and the thing is munching his head. You know.
They wouldn't get away with that, no.
It depends on how much they show. I guess what I mean is I'm not asking for the guy who gets his throat torn out in Day of the Dead with the guy you actually hear his vocal cords tear, you know.
Yeah, but I think like Resident Evil could kind of get away with that before 2000. After that, it's had to tone down the gore somewhat.
I think you and I are playing. Feels like we're playing very different games.
No. Let me just continue. Yes, you see the deputy getting his throat torn out, but that's in a very dark room and a very dark environment. Dario essentially has a spotlight thrown on him by the helicopter. And actually having his head torn off. You could have the headless body. You could even have the zombie turned around and you could kind of imply the head's being eaten on. But actually, seeing the zombie chewing on the head, I don't think you get away with that now.
At the very least, it
I
would have an
think-
issue with censorship in Japan because that's
Yeah.
been one of their main problems. Because I
I
know,
think they would possibly get away with it, but only that scene, because it's kind of like how Elliot Edward getting ripped in half in Remake 2. That's like their big gore shot. That is where they got it, and that would have been like their only place for it, and then
Yeah.
the rest of the game would have been toned down.
And I mean, like, Resident Evil 3 is a game that does not have a lot of gore in there. It doesn't have the blood that Resident Evil 2 had.
yeah, the physics detail and things like that. Yeah, just because they were pushing that engine so freaking far. I mean, even the yeah. Anyway, sorry, we're getting off track though.
Yeah, so we're probably going to be wrapping this up now, I think.
Yeah, I think we've done a pretty deep dive into the original Resident Evil and talked about a lot of the stuff and the development and stuff we like about it. And then next time we can shift focus to the remake and I think get into some of the more of the meat of like the content of the game itself, because I feel that a lot of that talk benefits from the talking about the differences between the two.
Yeah. And I think we will be kind of going into a deep dive about the characters.
Yeah. Yeah, we will talk a lot more about them.
Yeah. And just kind of like Vanessa said, we'll be talking about the differences between the original game and the remake.
Yeah, there's some very distinct differences that change the feeling of everything, and
Crimson Heads.
yeah, there's that. We'll talk about Crimson Heads next time. And also a little bit more on my feelings on like the spacing out of the monsters and like the big boss monsters, and how each area is punctuated by fighting one big animal monster. Except for Tyrant at the end. But I mean, he's man. Animals, man. Still counts.
Man, the most evil animal of all.
I mean, whenever the Tyrant busts out of the test tube, it is really, turns out it was man. Actually, one last note, like, it always got me because I played Jill most often for the original Resident Evil, and a lot of times in the original, they had that option where, like, in one of the endings, he just fucks off. Wesker fucks off.
Oh, for God's sake.
And then you find him in, like, the power room without his, like, he's been, like, pulled apart by chimeras, and that's actually...
Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Yeah, and that actually is the scene that ends up getting adapted in the book. So
We're going to have to
that
order
was
the books
actually
again, aren't we?
Oh God, no.
I still have mine. I actually brought them with me when I moved, so I'm set.
Okay, so Chris,
good.
I vote we nominate Vanessa to read all the books so we don't have to.
I've got plenty of experience with the books.
I feel, and the thing is, I feel bad. Like because I've now, since those books, when I read those as a teenager, I have read far worse.
Oh yeah,
I've
way worse.
Dies the Fire deserves to die in a fire, for example. But yeah, it's, I don't know. At some point, it's
I
like
would-
I need to. It's like I feel like I want to give it another try, but do I need to give it another try? I don't know.
I would take those books any day of the week over Ready Player One.
Yeah, well, I listened to a zombie audiobook and that's 13 hours of my life I'm not getting back.
Oh, dude, my
It's
sympathies.
it's one of those stories where you have all these characters, they make it through alive until the last two chapters when everyone bar three minor characters die.
Bummer.
Lame.
So, I think that's kind of it now from us. So,
Yeah. That's going to be our part 1 then.
Right. The one thing I was going to just mention, and I guess to end on a joke, and so we're not, bemoaning. I'm sure people might be disagreeing with our
Being a
opinions,
bummer.
but I mentioned this. I mentioned this off mic. Is the moment when Wesker shows Chris the tyrant and is like, "This is the ultimate life form, tyrant," and Chris starts laughing, and it's like, "Chris, stop it." And I just had this idea that is the Chris Brofield moment of dunking nerd Wesker's books.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a point, because if you look at Tyrant, if it's supposed to be the ultimate life form, it can't spread on its genes. It doesn't have any nads. Its heart is on the outside and presents a massive fucking target. Its face probably doesn't even work properly. It's got one giant claw, and nature hates symmetry. Your ultimate life form is a fucking joke.
That's an
Tyrant.
excellent note. Tyrant, yes. Excellent note to go down on.
Also, it doesn't have an ass.
Tyrant. He's a fucking joke. There you go, guys. That's the quote of the episode.
That's good. There we go. Oh,
So, I have been Paul, aka Castle Rook.
I have been Chris, aka Jabberwocky1986 / Chris Jabberwock.
And I've been Vanessa, aka Vanessa Sketch. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at the ESTATEMENT Pod. That's a statement with an E. Or if you got any questions, comments, or anything that you'd like us to cover in a future episode, feel free to drop us a line there or email us at spencerestatement@gmail.com. And you can follow all of us on Twitter at our respective handles.
All those links will be in the description.
Yep. And we will catch you all much sooner next time for the remake portion of this two-parter. So everyone stay safe out there, and we will see you all soon.
Bye, everybody.
And don't itch your tasty.